The music was too cheerful for what I was feeling. Strings, laughter, champagne bubbles, all too bright, too loud. I sat at the farthest corner table, the one tucked behind a column where the waiters rested their trays. That was my seat. The seat they saved for me. I watched as my sister, glowing in lace and diamonds, twirled beneath the golden lights. Her laughter echoed across the hall, sweet to everyone else, but to me it rang like a dare. Every guest turned to admire her. Not one looked my way. The empty chair beside me was a reminder. I wasn't meant to belong. I folded my napkins slowly, carefully, pretending to be unfazed. I had learned long ago how to keep my hands steady when my heart was not. It wasn't the first time my sister made a scene of kindness that wasn't kind at all. Once she gave me a birthday cake with my name misspelled. Once she told people I couldn't afford a proper dress. Tonight she'd gone further. She'd placed me in the corner as if I were an afterthought. When the waiter came around, he hesitated. "Would you prefer the chicken or the salmon, ma'am?" he asked softly, almost apologetic. I smiled. "Whichever she's not having," I said, nodding toward the bride. His eyebrows lifted, uncertain whether I was joking. I wasn't. The clock on the wall ticked toward 7. I checked my phone once. A single unread message blinked on the screen. "Everything's ready." I locked it immediately, slid it under my napkin and took a sip of lukewarm water. My pulse steadied. Across the room my sister caught my eye. She mouthed, "Smile," and raised her glass. I did. A quiet, measured smile that didn't reach my eyes. Her husband, tall, charming, already distracted by the photographers, wrapped an arm around her. His cufflink caught the light, silver against her white sleeve. A small, sharp glint. I remembered when that cufflink was meant for someone else. The speeches began. Her friends cried and clinked glasses. I kept my head slightly bowed, tracing the condensation on my glass. When her maid of honor spoke about sisterhood that lasts forever, I nearly laughed. If only they knew. At my table no one spoke to me. Couples leaned close to each other, whispering jokes, scrolling through photos. The woman across from me leaned toward her husband and asked, "Who's that sitting alone?" He shrugged. "Probably one of the bride's distant relatives." I wanted to correct him, but what would be the point? Let them think I was nobody. I had learned the advantage of being unseen. The candles flickered. The scent of roses mingled with expensive perfume and roasted garlic. My feet ached inside the only pair of heels I owned, but I didn't move. Stillness was power tonight. The band began a slow song and my sister's voice carried through the microphone. "I just want to thank everyone who's stood by me," she said sweetly. "Family means everything." The guests applauded. I didn't. Then came the bouquet toss. She turned, giggling, her back to the crowd. The unmarried women gathered at the center, squealing. I didn't stand. I was too far anyway. That, of course, was part of her design. "Come closer, Auntie," someone shouted. Laughter rippled. I smiled faintly but stayed seated. Let them play their little games. The bouquet arced high through the air, white roses bound with satin, and for a moment it spun directly toward me. Time slowed. I didn't flinch. I saw her eyes widen just slightly, realizing it might hit me. Perhaps she hadn't meant it to. Or perhaps she had. But before the bouquet reached me, a hand reached out from behind and caught it midair. A man's hand. Strong, steady. The petals brushed my cheek as he lowered it. He turned to me with a polite nod. "You almost got hit," he said quietly. "I'm used to it," I replied. My tone calm, almost amused. The guests clapped, oblivious. My sister froze for just a second before laughing too loudly. "Well done. Who's the lucky lady?" she called out, her voice trembling beneath the cheer. The man smiled but didn't answer. He simply handed the bouquet to a nearby child and sat down beside me, where no one had dared to sit all evening. The room shifted. I felt eyes turning toward us, curious. I could feel her gaze, sharp as glass. "Do I know you?" I asked under my breath, keeping my smile. "Not yet," he murmured. "But you will." Something in his tone made the hairs on my arms rise. I didn't look at him again. Instead, I focused on the stage where my sister was pretending to laugh. The waiter returned to refill my glass, his hand shaking slightly. The tension in the room had changed, small, invisible ripples passing through polite conversation. I leaned back, studying the hall. The golden drapes, the floral arches, the mirrored walls. I had helped design this venue years ago, before she took credit for the idea. Before she took more than that. I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror. She was watching me now, smile fixed, eyes nervous. "Beautiful evening," I said softly. The man beside me chuckled under his breath. "You've waited a long time for this, haven't you?" My fingers tightened slightly around the glass. "Long enough to make sure it counts." He nodded as if confirming something. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and adjusted his tie. Casual, smooth, like someone checking the time. But I noticed the small flash of metal at his wrist. "Not jewelry, equipment." "Careful," I whispered. "Not yet." He didn't reply. The next song began, louder this time, drowning out conversation. Guests returned to dancing. My sister's voice faded in the crowd, replaced by the hum of movement, the clink of glasses. I breathed in slowly, tasting the sweetness of the wine on the air. Everything smelled too clean, too staged. Then faintly my phone buzzed again. A single vibration against the tablecloth. I didn't look down, but I knew what it said. Confirmed. The man leaned closer, pretending to watch the dance floor. "You really want to do it here?" I smiled lightly, eyes never leaving my sister. Where else would it hurt the most? A burst of laughter erupted from the dance floor, her laughter brittle and forced. The waiter passed by again and knocked over a glass near my table. Red wine spilled across the white linen like a small wound. I reached for the napkin, dabbing it quietly. The stain spread anyway. "Accidents happen," I said aloud, though no one had blamed me. From across the room my sister raised her voice. "Everyone, let's take a photo. Come on, all together." She didn't look at me when she said it. I stayed seated, invisible in plain sight. But as the photographer turned his camera, his lens paused, just for a moment, on our table. The man beside me nodded once toward him. The flash went off. My sister blinked, startled. When the lights dimmed again, she looked around, uneasy. Something had shifted, something she couldn't name. I lifted my glass, meeting her eyes. "To family," I mouthed. Her smile faltered. The man beside me checked his watch. 10 minutes, he whispered. "Good," I said. "That's all she deserves." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, muffled by the glass walls. The scent of rain mingled with the roses, and for a fleeting second, I remembered all the times I had prayed for this. Justice wrapped in silence. People began to gather near the dessert table. My sister's bridesmaids were busy arranging candles, unaware that the night was already burning. She approached my table at last, bouquetless, pretending concern. "Are you okay back here all alone?" she asked sweetly. I looked up, calm. "I'm never alone," I said. Her brow furrowed slightly, catching the man beside me. "And who might you be?" He smiled politely. "Just someone she invited." Her eyes flickered between us. I could see the unease growing like a shadow behind her perfect lashes. "Well," she said, forcing a laugh, "enjoy the evening." She turned to walk away, but paused when he called after her, "You almost hit her with that bouquet." The room went still. She turned back, eyes flashing. "It was an accident." "Of course," he said with a half smile. "Funny how accidents have perfect timing." Her jaw tightened. She didn't reply. I met her eyes for a long moment, letting the silence speak. Every sound in the hall felt distant. The music, the laughter, even the rain. Finally, she turned away and disappeared into the crowd. I exhaled slowly, my pulse steady now. The man beside me leaned forward slightly. "She's nervous." "She should be," I said. Outside, lightning flashed through the windows, painting her white dress silver for a heartbeat. I watched her spin back toward the guests, pretending the world was still hers. But from where I sat, I could already see it slipping away. And then, almost tenderly, I whispered to myself, "The night has only begun." The rain outside thickened into a soft curtain, tapping against the tall glass windows of the hall. I could smell the damp air sneaking in through the open doors near the buffet table. People were still laughing, still dancing, but the rhythm had changed. It was slower now, uneasy, as if the air itself had shifted. The man beside me hadn't moved since the bouquet toss. He sat there, calm, like someone watching a play he already knew the ending to. His posture was deliberate, hands resting loosely on his lap, eyes quietly scanning the room. For a while neither of us spoke. The band played another romantic song, The kind my sister loved because it made her seem gentle, innocent. I sipped from my glass, letting the silence between us stretch until it felt like another heartbeat. Then he said softly, "You've waited years for tonight." It wasn't a question. I glanced at him, studying the faint reflection of the chandelier in his dark eyes. "You sound sure of that." "I should be," he said. "You're the one who called me." The weight of his words settled in the air. I hadn't expected him to say it aloud, not here, not surrounded by people who still believed the bride was a saint. My sister's laughter floated over the music again. She was back on the dance floor, clinging to her new husband's arm, performing happiness for every camera. Her eyes flicked toward me occasionally, quick, sharp glances she thought went unnoticed. "She's watching you," the man murmured. "She always did," I said quietly. "Ever since we were children." He turned slightly toward me. "And you let her?" I smiled faintly. "Until now." He studied me for a moment, then nodded as if confirming something he already knew. The lights dimmed as the servers began clearing the tables. I could hear the hum of the generators outside, the faint static from microphones being tested again. "Tell me," he said, "how did it start?" I looked down at my napkin, tracing the embroidered edge. "With a signature," I said. "And a lie." He leaned back, listening. "She forged our mother's name after the stroke. Moved the savings into her account. Told everyone it was for medical bills. But it wasn't. She used it to buy that house in Phoenix, the one she sold last year for triple the price." He didn't interrupt. Just watched my sister spinning under the lights. "She never stopped lying," I continued. "When I confronted her, she said I was jealous. That I wanted her life. So I stayed quiet. I thought silence was strength. And now," I said softly, "silence is strategy." He smiled just slightly. "Good answer." The waiter approached again, placing a slice of wedding cake in front of me. Vanilla white icing, the kind that looks beautiful and tastes like nothing. "Compliments of the bride," he said nervously. I looked at the small sugar rose on top, perfect, lifeless. "Tell her thank you," I replied. When he left, the man said, "She's trying to play nice. She's trying to see if I'll take the bait." He chuckled. "You're colder than I expected." "I've been warmed by worse fires," I said. He paused, his expression unreadable. Then, almost casually, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black envelope. He placed it on the table, close enough for me to see but not to touch. "What's that?" I asked. "Proof," he said. I didn't open it, not yet. Just looking at it made my pulse slow, steady, measured. Proof. That was the word I'd waited months to hear. "She won't survive this, you know," he said. "She'll learn," I corrected. He tilted his head. "You really believe that?" I looked toward the dance floor. My sister's laughter was louder now, forced. Her husband whispered something in her ear, but she shook him off. For a moment I saw it, the small crack in her perfect mask. "She's already unraveling," I whispered. A woman passed our table, brushing against my chair. She looked familiar. One of the bridesmaids, I thought. "Excuse me," she said quickly, but her eyes lingered a moment too long on the envelope. Then she walked away, glancing back twice. I sighed. "She's sending her people to snoop already." "Then it's working," the man said, his tone satisfied. The band shifted to a faster song. People cheered. The lights flickered with each flash from the photographer's camera. I felt the floor vibrate slightly from the bass, and yet my focus never left the stage. My sister took the microphone again. "Before we continue," she said, voice trembling with fake warmth, "I just want to thank my wonderful family, especially my sister, who's been so supportive." Gasps and polite applause followed. I felt every head turn toward me. The man leaned close. "She's trying to humiliate you publicly." "Yes," I said calmly. "She's always been predictable." The spotlight passed briefly over our table. I met her gaze, unflinching. "Congratulations," I said aloud, though my voice carried no emotion. Her lips twitched. She wanted me to break, to flinch, to react. But I just smiled, the same calm, measured smile that had always unnerved her. The man whispered, "You've got her cornered and she doesn't even know it." "She will," I said. "By midnight." He raised an eyebrow. "Midnight? That's when the photos go live." He nodded slowly. "So it's confirmed." Everything's scheduled, I said. Every transfer, every forged receipt, every lie, backed up, time-stamped, traceable. The man's eyes gleamed faintly. You're thorough. I've had years to practice, I said. We both turned as her husband excused himself from the dance floor, checking his phone. His expression changed, first confusion then concern. He walked briskly toward the stage, whispering something to her. She frowned, shook her head. But he showed her the screen. Her smile faltered. I saw it. The very moment she realized something was wrong. The man leaned in slightly. They're starting to notice. Good, I whispered. Let them. He studied me. You're enjoying this. No, I said truthfully. But I'm not sorry. Thunder cracked outside, echoing faintly through the hall. Someone shrieked playfully, the crowd laughed. But the timing was poetic. My sister disappeared backstage with her husband. A few guests whispered, curious. The music stumbled, then stopped altogether. The man adjusted his tie. Should I follow them? Not yet, I said. She'll come back. She always does. He gave a quiet, amused hum. You know her well. Better than she knows herself. A minute later she returned, face pale, hands trembling slightly. Her husband trailed behind, avoiding eye contact with anyone. She took the microphone again, forcing a smile. Technical issue, she said. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Well, you continue the music shortly. The crowd clapped politely. She avoided looking at me. I leaned back, my heart steady. It's beginning, I murmured. The man gave a low whistle. You've got impeccable timing. I told you, I said softly, everything's scheduled. He looked at me for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? He smiled faintly. A broken woman. Instead I found an architect. His words lingered. I didn't answer. I just watched her. My sister. The woman who spent years building her kingdom out of lies, now standing under chandeliers that suddenly felt too bright, too heavy. She took another sip of champagne and nearly choked. Her mother-in-law leaned in, whispering something sharp. I could read her lips. What's happening? Her eyes darted toward me again. This time fear. Her eyes darted toward me again. This time fear. I lifted my glass and took a calm sip. The man chuckled under his breath. You don't even have to move. That's the point, I said. The less I do, the louder she falls. A waiter appeared again, clearing plates. Would you like dessert? He asked quietly. Not yet, I said. The main course isn't over. He blinked, confused, and walked away. The man leaned forward, his tone softer now. Do you ever think about stopping it? About mercy? I turned to him, really looking at him for the first time. His face was kind, older than I'd realized. Maybe mid-40s. Lines near the eyes. Signs of a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little. Mercy. I repeated. She never gave any. He nodded, accepting that. Then I'll make sure it's clean. Clean is good, I said. Messy would make her the victim. I can't allow that. Outside the thunder rolled again, closer this time. Raindrops streaked the glass, distorting the lights into trembling rivers of gold. The photographer approached the stage again. Smile everyone, he shouted. My sister tried. Her lips barely moved. The man at my table turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the faint glint of a camera lens hidden in his cufflink. I caught it this time. You're recording everything, I whispered. He didn't deny it. You asked for proof, didn't you? I looked away, back to the stage. I did. The applause swelled again as she pretended nothing was wrong. People cheered, toasted, took photos. But I could see it, beneath the mascara, the trembling, the panic building. The man stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll signal you when it's done. Done? I asked softly. He gave a small, knowing smile. When she realizes who sent the files. My heart fluttered once, quick and sharp. I didn't show it. 5 minutes, he said, and walked toward the back of the hall. I stayed seated, calm, composed, tracing the edge of my glass with one finger. Across the room, my sister's husband was already scrolling through his phone again. His face turned gray. He whispered something harsh. She shook her head violently. The music stopped completely. Guests murmured. The hall grew quieter than it had been all evening. I looked down at the empty chair beside me, the one he'd just left. The rain outside sounded louder now, like applause. And in that strange silence, a thought crossed my mind, clear, steady, final. The stranger wasn't a stranger at all. He was the beginning of an ending I'd been waiting years to see. From where I sat, the ballroom shimmered with too much light. Every crystal glowed, every sequin burned against my eyes. The laughter had thinned to a nervous hum, people pretending to enjoy a celebration that suddenly felt heavier than before. Somewhere in that noise my sister was cracking. Her husband stood near the stage, phone in hand, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. I didn't have to guess what he was reading. The first batch had gone out. Quietly. Efficiently. Proof delivered exactly on schedule. I exhaled softly and straightened the napkin on my lap. My heartbeat was steady, measured, like the ticking of a clock. The man who wasn't a stranger slipped through the crowd unnoticed, heading toward the exit doors. A few guests turned to greet him, assuming he was another distant cousin. No one knew that the USB in his pocket carried the weight of my sister's lies. My gaze returned to her. She was still on the stage, clutching the microphone, the picture of grace on borrowed time. Her smile trembled as she tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out right. I could see her husband whisper something harsh. She nodded quickly, eyes darting across the hall, searching for me. When she found me, she froze. Our eyes met. Hers were wild, searching. Mine were calm. Then she mouthed, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I simply lifted my glass and took a sip. The screen behind her flickered. It was supposed to show the next photo slideshow. Childhood pictures, family moments, happy memories. Instead, the first image that appeared was not of her at all. It was a bank statement. The guests murmured, confused. At first they thought it was a mistake. The image changed again. Another document. Her name. A date. A transfer. Then another. My sister turned sharply toward the projector operator. "Stop that," she barked, her voice echoing through the microphone. But the slides kept moving. Her husband grabbed the laptop. The guest had gone silent. The only sound was the clicking of the slideshow advancing on its own, one screenshot at a time. She ran to the side of the stage, whispering furiously to the event manager. Her voice trembled so hard it cracked. The crowd began whispering now too. A woman near my table leaned toward her friend. "That looks like her company account." Her friend frowned. "Is that her signature?" It was. I knew it was. Every transfer, every forged document, time-stamped, undeniable. The man I'd hired had arranged the automation perfectly. Once the upload began, there was no stopping it. It would finish before she could even pull the plug. Her husband slammed the laptop shut, but it was too late. The images were already mirrored on multiple screens across the hall. Then came the photos. Not scandalous, just revealing. Her sitting in that luxury car she claimed she'd won in a raffle. Her meeting quietly with a realtor while pretending to care for our mother. Her smiling with the banker who helped her hide the transfers. A slow gasp spread through the crowd like a wave. My sister's voice broke. "This isn't true. Someone's editing this, it's not real." Her husband turned toward her, pale. "Then why is your name on all of it?" She looked at him, shaking her head. "It's not. Please, you have to believe me." But he didn't. I could see it in his face. The disbelief, the humiliation, the dawning realization that he'd married someone wearing a mask. The sound of my phone vibrating beneath the table pulled me back. I glanced at the screen. Message. Upload complete. Phase 2 ready. I deleted it immediately. I looked back up to see my sister stumble off the stage. Her bridesmaids rushed to her side, trying to help. She pushed them away, shouting. The microphone still caught her words, amplifying them through the speakers. "Who did this?" No one answered. She turned again, her eyes locking on me. "You," she screamed. "It's you, isn't it?" Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned. Cameras lifted. For a moment, every spotlight seemed to find me. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply adjusted my shawl and looked up at her. "If you have something to say," I said calmly, "say it properly." Her lip trembled. "You've ruined me." "No," I said quietly enough for only her to hear. "You did that yourself." The room was completely silent. Even the band had stopped playing. Then somewhere near the back someone clapped. Just once. A nervous, uncertain sound that quickly died. My sister broke. Tears streaked through her makeup. Her husband stepped away from her. Her friends followed. Even her in-laws whispered among themselves, their eyes sharp and cold. She looked smaller suddenly, lost in the lace and light she'd wrapped herself in. A part of me should have felt guilty. But guilt had expired long ago. I rose slowly from my chair. My legs ached, but my posture was steady. People stepped aside as I walked past, whispers following me like a low tide. As I neared the stage, she backed away, shaking her head. "Don't come near me," she said weakly. I stopped a few feet from her, close enough for her to see that I wasn't angry. "I told you," I said softly, "the truth always finds its way home." She blinked rapidly, her mascara running. "You don't know what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," I replied. "And so do you." The event manager approached nervously. "Should I cut the power?" he whispered to her. She nodded frantically, but before he could move, another screen flickered to life. It wasn't from the projector this time. It was from the live stream. Hundreds of viewers watching the wedding online. The chat flooded with messages. "Is this real? She stole from her own mother? Unbelievable." Her knees nearly buckled. The guests began leaving in clusters, murmuring. Her perfect evening was unraveling in real time, thread by thread. The man I'd hired appeared at the back of the room. Our eyes met briefly. He gave a single nod. Everything had gone as planned. Then he disappeared through the exit doors without a trace. My sister clutched the microphone again. "Listen to me. This is all fake. She's lying." But her voice cracked mid-sentence, desperate now, childlike. I watched her crumble under the same lights that once made her shine. Every false story, every stolen coin, every cruel smile she'd given me, it all returned to her, wrapped neatly in digital evidence. A waiter dropped a tray nearby and the crash startled everyone. My sister flinched violently, covering her ears. The sound of glass shattering seemed to echo the last bit of control she had left. Her husband took a step closer, his tone quiet but sharp. "We're done," he said. "Don't call me again." She reached for him, but he turned away. The photographers lowered their cameras. No one wanted a picture of this moment. I stood there, still as stone, watching the woman I used to share secrets with turn into a stranger begging for air. And yet I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. Like a deep breath I'd been holding for too many years finally escaping my chest. She sank to the floor, sobbing. Her veil came loose, sliding across the tiles like fallen snow. Someone whispered, "Should we call someone?" "No," I said quietly. "She just needs to sit with the truth." The manager shut off the screens at last, but the damage was irreversible. The silence that followed was almost sacred. I turned to leave. My heels clicked softly on the marble. With every step I felt lighter, calmer. I'd waited for justice. Not revenge, not chaos, just truth. And now it had unfolded in front of every person who once believed her lies. At the doorway I stopped and looked back one final time. She was still kneeling, surrounded by the remains of her own celebration. For a fleeting second I remembered us as little girls, barefoot in the yard, laughing under summer rain. She had once held my hand. She had once promised we'd never hurt each other. But that was another lifetime. A voice broke through my memory. A guest murmuring to another, "Did you see her face?" The sister didn't even flinch. They were right. I didn't. Because I couldn't afford to. Not yet. There was still one file left unopened. One final piece waiting for morning. I stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet roses and electricity. Street lights reflected off puddles, soft and golden. As I walked toward my car, my phone buzzed once more. A message. "Upload 3 scheduled for 6 a.m. Confirm?" I typed back, "Confirm." Then I slipped the phone into my purse and whispered to myself, "The ledger opens at dawn." And for the first time in years I smiled, not from victory but from peace. But peace, I was learning, doesn't come quietly. As I stepped toward my car, the glow of the ballroom still pulsed behind me. The faint music that resumed after my exit sounded wrong. Forced, uneven, like a celebration trying to pretend it hadn't just cracked in half. I could still hear her voice echoing inside, faint but frantic, muffled by glass and rain. I stopped under the awning and looked back through the window. My sister was on the floor again, surrounded by scattered petals and people pretending not to stare. She was talking fast, hands trembling, trying to convince anyone who'd listen that it was all a misunderstanding. But the faces around her had changed. They weren't adoring anymore. They were cautious, cold, curious. A valet approached me nervously. "Would you like your car brought around, ma'am?" "Not yet," I said softly. "I want to see how the night ends." He nodded and disappeared. Inside, her husband had taken the microphone. I could hear his voice faintly through the glass, calm, measured, but laced with disbelief. "We'll be ending the reception early," he said. "Please collect your belongings." A ripple moved through the guests. Chairs scraped. The sound of shoes on marble filled the silence where music should have been. And then applause. Short, scattered, awkward. People clapping because they didn't know what else to do. The sound of it stung. The applause wasn't for her anymore. It was the sound of people leaving. She stood frozen, bouquetless, her dress stained at the hem from kneeling on the floor. Someone tried to hug her. She flinched. Through the glass, I watched her lips move, pleading with her husband. He shook his head once, expression blank, then handed the microphone to the DJ and walked away. That was the moment her posture broke. Her shoulders collapsed inward as if the air had been punched out of her. I didn't feel joy. Only clarity. I opened my purse and took out my phone. A single notification blinked at the top of the screen. 6 a.m. upload confirmed. I locked it again. The ledger would finish itself. There was nothing left for me to do but witness the fall. A voice startled me. "You're still here." I turned. The man, the one who wasn't a stranger, stood a few feet away, rain darkening the shoulders of his suit. "You move quietly," I said. "It's a habit," he replied. "I wanted to make sure you saw what you needed to." I saw enough. He followed my gaze toward the hall. "She's unraveling faster than we expected." "She always did fall apart when people stopped clapping," I murmured. He studied me for a moment. "You really don't hate her, do you?" I hesitated. No. Hating her would mean I still cared enough to want something from her. He nodded, then glanced toward the road. "I can have the files wiped after dawn if you'd rather end it cleanly." I shook my head. "No. It has to stay. Some truths deserve permanence." A distant shout made us both turn. Her husband had stepped outside, arguing with one of her friends. "She lied to me for years," he said loudly. "You all helped her cover it up." The friend stammered an excuse, but the damage was done. The words carried, and people inside began whispering again. "She'll blame you for this," the man said. "I know," I replied. "She'll spend the rest of her life rewriting the story. But that's fine. People only believe what makes them comfortable." He smiled faintly. "And what makes you comfortable?" "Knowing she finally knows the truth." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the parking lot in sharp white light. For a brief second, everything stilled. The rain, the murmurs, even the tremor in my chest. Then thunder rolled deep and long as if the heavens themselves were closing the book. He offered me his umbrella. "You should go." "Not yet," I said again. He didn't argue this time. He simply stood beside me in silence. Through the window, my sister tried one last speech. "You all know me," she said, voice trembling through the speakers. "You know I'd never do anything dishonest." But no one looked convinced. Her father-in-law stood. "Return what isn't yours," he said quietly, "and perhaps we'll listen." The color drained from her face. Her friends gathered their purses and left. The photographer unplugged his equipment. The florist began dismantling the arch of roses she'd so proudly chosen. Piece by piece, her perfect night dissolved before her eyes. I whispered to myself, "This is the applause." The man turned toward me. "What?" "The silence," I said. "That's the real applause. When everyone finally stops pretending." He understood. I started walking toward the entrance and he followed a few paces behind. The doorman looked uncertain but opened it anyway. Warm air and the smell of melting wax drifted out to meet me. Inside, my heels tapped softly against the marble. Every step drew attention. Heads turned again, not in curiosity this time but in recognition. The quiet woman from the corner was walking straight into the center of the wreckage. My sister's head snapped up. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Leaving," I said simply. "But I thought I'd return something first." From my purse I took out the small velvet pouch I'd kept for years. I placed it on the nearest table. "Mother's necklace," I said. You dropped it once before. Her breath hitched. You had it all this time? I had everything you thought you hid, I replied. Gasps rippled through the few remaining guests. She lunged toward me, eyes wild, voice breaking. You think this makes you righteous? You think ruining me brings her back? I met her gaze. No. But it gives her peace. She froze. You stole from her when she couldn't speak, I said quietly. Now her story has been told. That's all I ever wanted. Her lips parted as if to argue, but nothing came out. Just a choked sound, part anger, part sorrow. Her husband appeared behind her. We're done here, he said flatly. The man beside me stepped forward then, his tone professional again. Everything is complete, he said. You'll get the final report in the morning. She stared at him, realization dawning. You work for her? He nodded once. Her knees gave way. The sound of her sobs echoed off the marble walls. Someone pulled the plug on the lights. Half the hall went dark. Candles flickered, throwing long shadows across the floor. The scent of smoke and wilting flowers hung in the air. The guests began filing out quietly, their shoes squeaking on the wet tiles. I stood still, watching as my sister clutched the edge of a chair to steady herself. Her veil caught on the leg of the table and tore slightly, a thin, soft sound that somehow hurt more than her cries. Please, she whispered. Don't leave me like this. I took a slow breath. You left me like this years ago. She closed her eyes as if the memory itself burned. I turned to the man. We're done. He gave a small nod. You sure? Yes. We began walking toward the doors. Behind us, the echoes of her sobs followed, muted, distant, fading. Outside, the rain had calmed to a drizzle. The air felt different now, lighter, thinner, cleansed. He opened the car door for me. You handled it better than most, he said quietly. I wasn't here to humiliate her, I replied. Only to end the lie. He studied my face. And did you? I hesitated. The answer wasn't simple. Partly. He smiled faintly. You'll sleep tonight. Maybe, I said. Before getting in, I looked back one last time. Through the glass, I could still see her silhouette, kneeling among the dying candles, framed by the last of the roses. The man followed my gaze. She'll talk, he said. Let her, I replied. Everyone talks louder when they're drowning. He chuckled softly. You're colder than you look. Age does that, I said, closing the car door. As the engine started, the headlights washed over the wet pavement, scattering reflections of gold and red. The music from inside finally stopped for good. He drove slowly down the long driveway, past the line of parked cars, past the gates that still glittered with wedding lights. Halfway down the road, I asked, Did you keep the originals? Of course, he said. They're stored off-site. You never know when truth needs a second performance. I nodded. Good. He looked at me sideways. You're not going to stop, are you? I smiled faintly. The ledger doesn't close until every page is read. He didn't press further. The wipers brushed away the last drops of rain as we turned onto the main road. In the side mirror, I caught one final glimpse of the ballroom, its lights flickering like a dying fire. Somewhere inside, my sister was still surrounded by everything she once thought she owned. I leaned back in my seat and whispered to myself, let her fall. The applause comes after. The man glanced at me. What did you say? Nothing, I said softly. Just a prayer. He nodded, eyes on the road. The city stretched ahead, quiet and glistening. Dawn was only a few hours away. And somewhere in that coming light, one last truth waited to rise. The road stretched ahead in silver ribbons, rain slick and glimmering beneath the streetlights. The man drove in silence, his focus steady, his hands firm on the wheel. The city slept around us, quiet, unaware that a story had ended tonight. I leaned against the window, watching the droplets slide down the glass. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Soft to do. The kind of softness that doesn't come from weakness but from surviving the storm. We didn't speak for a long time. The hum of the engine and the occasional sigh of the tires against wet asphalt filled the silence. Finally, he said, Where to? I thought about it. The hotel, the empty apartment, the ledger file waiting for dawn. None of those places felt right. Turn toward Rosewood Cemetery, I said quietly. He looked at me briefly, surprised, then nodded and took the next exit. The streets narrowed, lined with oaks and old stone walls. The rain eased into mist. The headlights caught 100 tiny drops floating in the air, turning them to dusted gold. When we stopped by the gate, I stepped out before he could open my door. The cold air met my face like a confession. He stayed by the car. "You shouldn't be alone here," he said softly. "I'm not," I replied. "She's here." I walked through the iron gate, the sound of gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The cemetery was silent except for the faint dripping of water from the trees. The smell of wet earth brought back the memory of another night, the night we buried my mother. My sister hadn't cried then either. She'd worn a veil that day too, only black instead of white. I found the grave easily. Always did. Margaret Hale, 1941 to 2021. Beloved mother. Gentle hands. Unbroken heart. I knelt beside the stone, brushing the fallen petals away with my fingertips. The ground was cold, damp, alive. "She saw it all," I whispered. "Every lie, every theft. And she forgave you anyway. That's who she was. I wasn't built like her." The mist swirled faintly, almost as if listening. I took the velvet pouch from my purse, the same one I'd left at the reception, and opened it again. Inside was the necklace, now glistening with raindrops. Mother's locket. The one my sister stole, pawned, and then pretended she'd lost. "I returned it once," I said softly. "But it belongs here with you." I placed it gently at the base of the headstone. The gold looked fragile against the gray. The man's footsteps approached behind me. "You shouldn't stay long," he said. "It's almost dawn." "I know." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you feel better?" I smiled faintly. "No. But I feel finished." He crouched beside me, his expression unreadable. "She'll face charges, you know. Once the full files go out." "I know," I said again. "Let the world decide what to do with her." "I'm done deciding." He nodded, respecting that. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the morning birds beginning to stir. Then he asked, "Why call it a ledger?" I looked up at the pale light spreading between the trees. "Because ledgers don't lie," I said. "They don't care who's right. They only balance the page." He smiled quietly. "So that's your piece, balance." "Yes. Not revenge. Not pity. Just balance." He stood then, brushing off his coat. "Then it's time to close the book." I rose too, slow but steady. My knees ached, but I didn't mind. Pain reminded me I was still here, still accountable. We walked back toward the car. A soft breeze lifted the mist, carrying with it the faint scent of wet roses, the same kind used in her bouquet. Before getting in, I turned toward the east. The horizon was warming, streaked with light. Dawn punctual as ever. My phone buzzed in my hand. A final notification. Upload complete. Ledger archived. No sound. No drama. Just the quiet completion of everything I'd built. I deleted the message and powered the phone off. The man opened the passenger door for me. "Where now?" he asked. "Home," I said. "But not the old one. I sold it last week." He nodded, understanding without questions. "You've thought of everything." "I had to," I said. "I was invisible for too long." As we drove back through the sleeping streets, he reached for the radio, turning it low. An old song played, something soft from the 1970s. The kind of tune my mother used to hum while folding laundry. For the first time, I let myself listen. Halfway down the highway, he spoke again. "Do you ever think she'll understand why you did it?" "Maybe," I said. "One day. When the noise dies down. When she's sitting in silence long enough to hear herself think. Maybe then." He nodded slowly. "And if she doesn't? Then that's her story to live with." We stopped at a small diner by the edge of town. The sun was rising behind the hills, bleeding soft orange light through the clouds. Steam fogged the windows as I stepped inside. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. I sat in the corner booth facing the window. The man ordered 2 coffees and didn't ask what I wanted. He already knew. When he brought the cup to me, I wrapped my hands around it, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. "You're free now," he said quietly. I shook my head. "Freedom's too big a word. I'll settle for peace." He smiled. "Then you've earned it." The waitress came by, offering sugar. Her name tag read Anna. Her hair was gray, tied neatly in a bun. She reminded me of my mother. Kind eyes, steady hands. Long night, she asked gently. The longest, I said. She smiled with that patient knowing that only women of a certain age have. They all end eventually. I nodded. Yes. They do. When she left, the man looked at me and said, You're not going back, are you? No, I said. There's nothing left there but ghosts. We finished our coffee in silence. Outside, the world was waking up. Delivery trucks, early commuters, a boy walking his dog. Normal life, untouched by everything that had just ended. I paid the bill and slipped a folded note beneath the saucer. A habit from my younger days. Old courtesies are hard to unlearn. As we stepped outside, the man turned to me. You know, he said, most people who do what you did end up looking back. I already did, I said. For 30 years. He smiled faintly. Then what now? I live. We stood there for a moment, the wind lifting the edge of my scarf. He looked at me one last time as if memorizing my face, then walked to his car. I'll send the final documents to your lawyer, he said before leaving. Thank you, I replied. For everything. He gave a small nod and drove away. The sound of his car faded down the road, leaving only bird song and the low hum of morning traffic. I looked up at the sky. The clouds were thinning and sunlight touched the wet pavement like liquid gold. I felt the first warmth of the day on my skin. A quiet kind of crown resting where grief used to live. I walked a few blocks to the bus stop. No one recognized me, no one stared. I liked it that way. An old woman sitting beside me glanced over and said, You look lighter, dear. I smiled. I finally put something down. She nodded knowingly, then went back to watching the road. The bus arrived. I climbed on, found a seat by the window and watched the city blur past. The bakery, the florist, the same shop where my sister once pretended she couldn't afford a gift for mother. All of it familiar yet distant now. I reached into my purse and took out the locket keychain, not real gold, just plated, that I'd kept from years ago. I turned it in my hand and for the first time it didn't ache to hold. Outside, the sun rose fully, catching on the rooftops, spreading over the quiet streets like forgiveness. I thought of my mother, her soft voice, her endless patience. She used to say, the truth wears no crown but it never bows. I finally understood what she meant. This wasn't about vengeance or exposure anymore. It was about standing tall again after being bent for too long. It was about breathing freely without waiting for permission. The bus slowed near the river. I pulled the chain from my wrist, kissed it once and let it drop into the water below as we crossed the bridge. The ripples spread wide, carrying it away, small and shining, like closure itself. I leaned back, closed my eyes and whispered, It's done. The world outside moved forward and for the first time in decades I let it. And somewhere behind me, far from the noise, far from the ruins of her wedding, the sun touched my mother's grave, glinting off the locket I'd left there, a crown of quiet justice. Peace doesn't always arrive with forgiveness. Sometimes it comes wearing a quiet crown. If this story touched your heart or chilled your spine, don't leave just yet. Subscribe for more emotional revenge stories, each one darker, deeper, and closer to the truth we never say out loud.